All right, good evening. Welcome to Pump Up the Volume, and welcome back. If you're joining us again, my name is Luis Daniel Munoz. Again, I'm a medical doctor here in the state of Rhode Island, really focused on industry at this point, supporting the vaccination efforts. And prior to that, contact tracing efforts. In terms of my past, I also ran for governor here in the state of Rhode Island back in 2018. I'm joined by, sorry for the echo. That was actually another device, but I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts who are stars in the independent media airwaves, as you already may know, but just to introduce them briefly, we have Mr. Bill Bartholomew from the Bartholomew Town podcast joining us back after a couple of weeks of hiatus. Bill will give us some of all the great things he's been doing. Also, we have Mr. Scott Rotunda from WBOB 990, been on the air for some time, also does a lot with local politics in the city of Pawtucket and beyond. And so Scott can give you a rundown. I'm sure you'll hear bits and pieces of what's been going on that Scott's aware of on the national and local level. And of course, the founder of the Coalition Radio Network that we're actually streaming through today, and the co-founder of the Libertarian Party here in the state of Rhode Island, Mr. Pat Ford, who may be cutting off the air for a couple of minutes to give testimony and to push those buttons from the administration front. So just in case he goes MIA, that's what Pat's doing, and that's what he's always done. So it's great to have my friends here with me. We all bring different perspectives, some more extreme than others, as you will notice with some of our more colorful debates. But we have a great time, and frankly, it's with love that we amplify the voices, right, of communities that are seeking more advocacy and a government that will advocate on their behalf. And so let's start with that. Why don't we go ahead, and I want to do something a little different today. So Bill, maybe you can give us an update on all the cool stuff you've been doing, and then after that, we'll go to Scott to hear about the national news, and then jump right back into the local updates.
Great to be back on the coalition. I missed you fellas. It was a tough couple of weeks there without Pump Up the Volume on my agenda. But to be honest, it's been great. You know, doing a lot for B-Town over on the podcast side and doing a lot on the TV side with Rhode Island PBS. We've just been in the trenches working on a whole bunch of interesting stories that will be coming out this spring. So that's where I've been, and probably will be for a good part of the spring. But always a pleasure to be here with you, gentlemen.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to seeing the cool stories, Bill. And election season is coming up, so I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about. Yeah. Scott, so in your busy work days and with all the things that you're doing, you somehow manage to keep the pulse of the national news. And so sure. Why don't you tell us going on, and if you can, bridge it into Rhode Island too, because as you know, we do have a governor that somehow is connected to what's going on the national front.
Sure, yeah. So a couple of things I have. As we know, impeachment part 2 is over now, right? And the president, for whatever it was worth, was not convicted. One thing that came out of that in the testimony afterwards, it's really disappointing to me, is all the finger pointing now. With the riot and the assault on our Capitol on January 6th. And I'm just not seeing anyone. I'm not seeing any party, and I don't mean political party. I mean group of people, not the Capitol Police, not Donald J. Trump and his minions, not the Republican Party, not QAnon, nobody taking responsibility for that. And that's really extremely disappointing to me. Also, as we start to bridge from national into local, I know that we've now passed 500,000 deaths from COVID in the United States just under the last year. So I have 2 numbers for you. First number, 500,000. The second number is 667,000. So the first number, you know what that is because I just told you. That's the amount of American lives lost due to COVID. 667,000 is the number of Americans killed in combat in every single war since we became a nation. So let those 2 numbers roll around in your head when people tell you that COVID is a hoax and that it's just the flu, and not to worry about it, that it's overblown, and we don't need to social distance and all that. Keep those 2 numbers in your mind. In 1 year, we've lost almost as many people as we have in combat in every war we've ever been in since 1776. And bringing that to the local level, the internecine fighting between the incoming McKee administration and the outgoing Raimondo administration disappoints me even further. I feel kind of like, and this isn't, whether you like Raimondo or McKee or dislike them both, fine. But right now, I feel like we're in a car going down the highway, approaching Thurber's Avenue, and no one's at the wheel. And the two people in the front seat are arguing and bickering. And I think it's a bad look, especially when you consider next door in Connecticut, they're doing pretty well with their vaccine rollout. I know Massachusetts had a hiccup where their website crashed almost when it opened, so I guess we haven't had that happen. But so it's really not a good look for someone who's set to take her place on the national stage as the new Commerce Secretary. So that's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Scott, and just a lot in there. Obviously, I mean, in terms of where we are as a nation. Also, surprisingly, how the Biden administration hasn't necessarily stepped up to the plate as much as I thought it would on several fronts. In terms of vaccination, I think states are still alone, still doing their own thing. I think that if we can achieve that 100 million vaccines in terms of availability and access, then great. But still, the logistical challenges remain on the states, and there has not been a significant investment or effort on the national front, on the federal government front, to actually improve the software that's been made available to states. And so, to speak to that initially, I'm helping bring a new system to Massachusetts, and what I find interesting is that the hiccup it had was really a consequence of having the state having used software that was template software, right? It wasn't refined, not as much support, not as much of like an end-to-end experience for patients or individuals seeking vaccinations. My concern with Rhode Island, in a lot of ways, is that it is relying on that same software. Now, we have, to our advantage, smaller numbers in the state of Rhode Island. So depending on how these phases work and how the scheduling is created, you could scale Rhode Island operations and keep the volume low enough to not crash a system. But in the event that we were to be too ambitious or overly ambitious with these mass vaccination sites, we could run into the same challenge in Rhode Island. And Rhode Island historically has not been necessarily quick to pull in off-the-shelf products, as we know with UHIP and many other solutions. It oftentimes wants to create its own thing, or just for some reason or other selects the wrong vendors. Maybe that's a little bit of crony politics for you. So crony politics. Now let's get to the Raimondo administration, by the way. It's interesting that John Marion talked about today, what the Constitution actually allows for in terms of delegating the budget, and whether it's feasible by executive order to delegate responsibilities of the budget to Dan McKee or not. And so this kind of like smoke screen that's going on in a lot of ways, where McKee is set up to be this fall person. I'm not saying that his comments have been concerning, his public comments. Maybe there's not power behind them. They have been concerning. But it's still interesting to see Raimondo want him to be on stage as Raimondo makes all the decisions. It's kind of like a really bad SNL skit. So let me pose a question. I'd love to get all of your thoughts on this question. So here we are. Raimondo may be the Secretary of Commerce at some point within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Even if that's the case, that is really falling at a point in time in this crisis, and even with the budget, where all of the decisions Raimondo would have already made, right, for the next fiscal year, vendor decisions for the vaccination deployment program. What does she leave McKee actually doing at that point? What will McKee actually have the power to do in 3 weeks? So that's a question. Take it where you will. Why don't we go ahead and start with Pat, then we'll go with Bill, then Scott.
Well, this is assuming, of course, that Governor Raimondo wins the nomination. It's interesting. I follow a political betting site called predictit.org. And I've only bet on it a couple of times, mostly for libertarian stuff. But over the last couple of days, the market has rejiggered significantly towards a lower than one would think expected support of Governor Raimondo. Going into this, I had thought that given the proximity to the riots and the overall demeanor of the Republicans, which is to be kind of shrinking in the corner and not looking for additional controversy, I would have thought this would have sailed through by now. I don't believe in coincidences. The fact that it hasn't just been pushed on a day and just voted on tells me something is afoot. And perhaps Mr. Reed's action today may be precipitated because they may have the votes finally, or think they have the votes. I would hope that the Republican Party in the Senate would do a great deal more oversight than the Commerce Committee did, who essentially caved for the gee whiz, ain't Gina great. I'm of the probably decided minority that hopes Gina stays, because she is, in fact, the gift that keeps on giving, whereas the rest of the state just seems hell-bent to get her the hell out of town. As it affects Mr. McKee, I was at the press conference last week where pretty much rebellion erupted out in the press corps finally, because it was childish to say the best. Most of the blame being on Governor Raimondo, of course. But there was an element of, I'm going to take my ball and stay home for Lieutenant Governor McKee. Not that he hasn't been jerked around, to be blunt. I don't see how some sort of partial accoutrement of power, if you will, to the lieutenant governor can really help with regard to the budget or any other stuff. She just needs to go the hell home. She needs to resign. She should have resigned weeks ago. The question I asked at the press conference, I'll still continue to ask. At what point in time did the governor decide that her personal job prospects, her career, was more important than an orderly transition to government? The implication being, of course, the safety of everyday Rhode Islanders. If in fact this is, and I don't think any of us in this virtual room are deniers at all, even remotely, but to the point, if in fact this disease is as serious as she has claimed over the last 8 months, where she's essentially interfered with the body politic, the conduct of Rhode Island government, and the ability of Rhode Island businesses to engage in anything remotely normal or even normal given the circumstances, that would speak to the severity of it. The notion that she just simply disappeared from the screen, I think, is one of the most cowardly acts in American politics today. And that's saying something given the orange Cheeto. If you can top him, man, you're going places.
Thanks, Pat.
Well,
All right. So,
I mean, that's
no.
it. Oh, sorry. I didn't know if I was, I've been off the show for 2 weeks. Here I am messing up the flow. We had a great flow going. All of a sudden, the guy comes back. Oof. Down the drain it goes.
Yeah.
Look out. Look, this situation's outrageous. This binary version of power in this state is embarrassing. And frankly, when I heard that Dan McKee wasn't attending the press conference last week, I wasn't surprised at all. I thought it was doing him a disservice. He did not look particularly gubernatorial standing on the sidelines at the previous several weeks as Dr. Alexander Scott led the charge. This whole thing is out of control. And what I asked this morning of Dr. Philip Chan, who made an appearance on my podcast, I asked him several things in this department, but specifically asked, how has the chaos in the executive level of Rhode Island politics impacted your ability to get vaccine into the appropriate arms? And he did admit that the chaos was not optimal. However, in his opinion, anyway, at least what they're putting out, at least at his level, what they're putting out is that while there's no question that this thing resolving itself ASAP is a better situation for Rhode Islanders, that it really hasn't impacted what's going on the ground. So you've got the Department of Health saying, look, yeah, we've got a disorderly transition of power. Yes, we've got two governors, the incoming governor, which, by the way, I was at McKee's event on Friday night. He said, look, I'm not a governor. I'm an incoming governor. There's a huge difference. And he's absolutely right. But you've got a Department of Health that's saying none of this matters in terms of their plan. You've got McKee with his plan, with Joe Policina and company, listing out how they want to approach things from a municipal level. And you've got a Governor Raimondo still in charge, creating this at minimum regional, if not just sort of centralized vaccine distribution method. They clash. The health department has not asserted itself in any way, shape, or form publicly. And we find ourselves in this bizarre and embarrassing moment.
If I could add just one thing quickly to our reigning superstars' points, if there's any tiniest upside to this, we are seeing Mr. Policina in action. And the notion that he would attempt to gain higher office is just clearly a terrible idea.
I mean, it's just embarrassing. Just backing up what Bill said, it's just utterly embarrassing. And, I'm going to take a little bit from Bill and a little bit from Pat here. Absolutely, Governor Raimondo was putting her career path ahead of what is best for Rhode Island. Even if there has been no effect for the Department of Health for the rollout and all of that, I still say that when you're elected governor or mayor or any sort of leadership position, or even if you're in that leadership position at your work, you have what's called a fiduciary responsibility. You have to lead, you have to look out for the people that you are entrusted to look out for. And I don't think that anybody in this virtual meeting room right now would disagree that in the best interest of Rhode Island, it is in all of our best interests for there to be this orderly transition of power, and we're not getting it. And I mean, really, I'll disagree a little bit with Pat. I think the odds of Gina Raimondo not being Commerce Secretary are kind of like the odds of me kissing the face of God tonight. I mean, it's possible, it's just not really probable. So, I mean, I would just think the better course of action will be to resign, orderly transition of power, and prep herself to go and hopefully do Rhode Island proud on the national stage. Because despite how I might feel about her, in my heart, I really do hope that she does well.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Scott. I mean, we all want the country to do well. I mean, Secretary of Commerce is an important position. I just don't have faith that her actions have historically been represented by helping the small people, right? And I say small not from my lens, but from her lens. And commerce really, in the state of Rhode Island, should have been focusing on micro businesses. At the federal level, I would say the same is true. And so hopefully there's a transformation that takes place internal right here. I don't know if it will. With that said, I find it interesting that as Governor Raimondo is not in the spotlight, you also start seeing the Seth Magaziners of the world hitting Dan McKee, right? It seems like someone who has been the protege for Raimondo for some time, placed in the treasurer position by Governor Raimondo, interested now in running for governor, likely to be endorsed by Governor Raimondo, is left to attack and undermine McKee, just as the governor herself indirectly undermines Lieutenant Governor McKee. And as all of this is taking place, as the drama unfolds, as we have the Greek tragedy in front of us, which Rhode Islanders, whether we admit it or not, we love it, right? We get sucked into that, and then we take our eyes off of the real crime that's taking place. The massive merger between Lifespan, Care New England, and Brown University, without any real community engagement around what that means, not only for the employees, not just physicians and nurses, but the support staff, many of who come from Pawtucket, from Central Falls, right, from West Warwick. And, what happens to their jobs? Also, how does this merger, this monopoly that's taking place, as many other monopolies have taken place in Rhode Island, how does that impact health equity, healthcare cost, right? So something big just happened, and instead we are left looking at this, Royal Rumble against one that's taking place on the mainstream media front. So I know that this seems disconnected, but I don't think it is disconnected. And so what I'm interested in for this kind of final segment of the talk is what is really going on in terms of substantive changes today in Rhode Island that community should be aware of and concerned about, independent of who the next governor is, because it's happening now, right? It's happening right now. So with that said, that's kind of like an open question, but it's inviting all three of you to bring in knowledge and insights into what's going on, what we should pay attention, whether it aligns with the merger or some other issue. Please feel free to comment. So this time around, we'll start with Scott, we'll go to Bill and then Pat.
Sure. I think what we should all be concerned with is actually something you just talked about a few minutes ago, how, we have an incoming governor being actively undermined by another potential gubernatorial candidate. And as you said, if Mr. Magaziner, Treasurer Magaziner, is going to be endorsed by, at that point, former Governor Raimondo, it's kind of like our choice is being made for us, so that all the big money people, if you will, get behind Magaziner to kind of try to suck the air out of the room for the gubernatorial race. And I mean, that's something akin to, I don't want to get into hyperbole, but that's almost akin to what we used to see in the former Soviet Union, right? That the party apparatchiks would get together and designate their next big wheel, if you will, and put him or her forward, and that was your candidate. I think that's what we should be worried about.
Forgot the order.
Yeah, Bill.
Wow.
It's you, Bill.
We're gonna send,
Okay, yeah.
we're gonna send you down to Pawtucket or Worcester.
Yeah,
Holy
exactly.
cow.
Yeah, exactly. Please to me to Polar Park immediately. Look, the big thing right now. Look, the hospital merger. It was seeming like it was inevitable. It's just a matter of the society we've built. And what's fascinating about it is, I put up the question on Twitter and in my Facebook group, what do you think about it? And whether you're on the left, the right, outer space, pretty much the same engagement came through, and Instagram as well, which is a much younger audience in my case. Everybody recognizes this for what it is, which is a furthering of less options, less competition, and a less likely to produce a roadie care type of Medicare for all, or effective private sector hospital system. So it's kind of like you're losing the best of both options. The full-on socialist approach to medicine, quote unquote, or the full-on private sector approach to medicine. Both of those are off the table now because of this. And people recognize that and understand that when you have these types of conglomerates, it doesn't drive competition in a meaningful way locally or even regionally. And it also is giving more power to a sector that already has a tremendous amount of influence and power. By the way, also the union wrote in, they're worried about job consolidation. Where do these people go?
This tears at the soul, if you will, of a free marketeer. On one hand, I'm not so much worried about job consolidation, because I believe that market efficiencies can be bred through consolidation of individual jobs, when in fact there's no need to have duplication of efforts. But the market should be sorting that out, not this sort of structured, overly sympathetic eye towards the two hospitals. I listened on the Dan York show this afternoon when one of the CEOs came on, and they claimed about being gutted and this and that. And, accounting for hospitals is got to be a fascinating look on the inside. I would love to know how that sausage is made, because number one, my father always had a great point when I was young and we were talking politics, because that's what we did in my house. We didn't talk about sports. We talked about politics. And he often found it intriguing that, and Doctor, maybe you can comment on this tonight or another night, that doctors, in a sense, get their offices built for them to a large degree. And we understand there are costs involved. But right now, what we don't need is a monolithic, consolidated, virtually impregnable fortress of medicine. What we need is competition. And we need it to be vicious, and we need it to be aggressive, and we need to be focused on patient care and all the good things that can come from competition. And we need, of course, quite frankly, if health insurance could traverse state lines easily, then we need more competition from southeastern Massachusetts from a variety of aspects, and or even Connecticut and southern Connecticut. We need more competition to breed efficiencies and to breed responsiveness, so that the medical customer, who is ultimately paying for this through this incredibly convoluted system that we have, whether it be by taxes and or their own outrageously priced medical insurance, have people catering to them. So and then add on the, as we call it on the coalition, the full Rhode Island, where that there's going to be benefits built in for the connected and the few. Something as controversial, I think, in a few months, whether or not board directors got early vaccination will almost seem trivial to the kind of competitive and cost benefits that'll be geared to the very few, and that just can't be. That just can't happen. I'm wary of antitrust laws because I think they're wielded too heavily against companies that have been successful because of high performance. But at this point in time, the government giving a blessing on one more monopoly in Rhode Island, that simply can't happen. And by the way, a candidate.
Wait. Pat just said government works sometimes.
No,
I think
I
Pat
didn't
just
say
said that.
Nope.
I
Didn't say that. Government
Exactly.
never works. Government never works.
Like we need the horn that goes off at the Patriots Stadium should go off.
Nope, government never works. What I said was, I have to go into the explanation, I have to spin, but what I said was that government can't stop this. What we need to do is make it easier for out-of-state corporations in terms of medical facilities at every level to jump into the market to provide competition. The base needs to be expanded. We can't cede the ground because of barriers to entry from out-of-state organizations. So there you go.
So I heard that, Pat. I want to acknowledge that I did hear that. I also want to acknowledge that antitrust laws as a mechanism, as a tool, where you also said that. So just want to point that out. But
I said I'm
think,
loath to use them.
Yeah. I know, Pat. I know. We know where you stand. I'm just joking. But look, just to use an example to one of the points you alluded to. We saw that with the new Speaker of the House. Some of the employees that were let go from the previous Speaker of the House's, I guess, little cabinet, whatever you call it. They were part-time attorneys and had full benefits. So we certainly see that, people that work in the government that have connections end up reaping the benefits of these type of special interest decisions or decisions that are made on the basis of special interest. I also want to point out, so that's one example of we should be looking at those areas and seeing how this is working against some Rhode Islanders and yet for others. But as we see this merger, I think I've heard some proponents of it, and that worries me. The assumption that these organizations coming together are somehow going to create price controls for themselves to make sure that they don't increase healthcare costs, or somehow that institutions like Brown University that barely accept students from Rhode Island into their medical school and continue to gentrify Providence are somehow going to care about addressing equitable allocation of resources specific to community health that would reduce emergency room visits. These are questions, and frankly, questions that people, that even those that find themselves on the progressive left, but somehow are associated with Brown, don't want to ask, and yet we should be asking it. Who reaps the benefits of this merger? On one hand, Pat, you've said it, competition might create sufficient stability in the market where we can have other options to choose that might force the major players to control their own prices. Without that, we're 100% relying on a state government that did not even pull community in to the discussions that inform this decision. And that is a fact, right? We're not talking about a few individuals that were invited to sit on a committee. We're talking about the HESs, the health equity zones, and organizations now that are keeping people alive, that have done the contact tracing, that are supporting vaccination and food assistance. Those organizations that represent the community were not involved. And that's concerning. So that's my kind of open-ended comment here, just food for thought. We are going to close up the show now. And so if each of our my fellow co-hosts here could, in 60 seconds, tell everyone where they can find you, what you'll be doing in the next week, then we'll go ahead and close up the show after that with the last 60 seconds. So why don't we start? We'll go all the way around this time. Bill, you'll close out the show today because you haven't been here a couple of weeks, so we'll give you that. And then so Pat, you first, then Scott, then Bill.
Well, we've got a couple things going on tonight. If you want to stay tuned to the Coalition Radio Network, We've got a newish show, which was just on last week for the very first time. It's a restaurant, sort of an inside business restaurant chat show. Mike Flory is a good friend, and he's starting it, and it's called Chopped, and it's just great stuff if folks are into the mechanics of the restaurant business. Tonight, interesting guest, Joanne Giannini, former state representative, longtime state representative, someone who's been involved literally in every facet of government. At 9:30 tonight, we'll be on. Of course, we do replays during the day, but she's going to be talking about her candidacy for the lieutenant governorship, something that she's aggressively pursuing, has a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of experience in a lot of different aspects of Rhode Island public life, and I think she makes a very compelling case. Folks, you can watch us we're actually on 4 nights a week now with show and programming. CoalitionRadioNetwork.com is the website. And of course, you're here, so you know that Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio is where you can watch our stuff. Like us and share us. For all of the folks tonight who are here, the sharing and social media support is the mother's milk of independent media. It's how all of us, Mr. Bartholomew, Mr. Rotundo, myself, Dr. Munoz, get our voices above the white noise of conventional lamestream media. Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody. So you can catch me every Monday night from 8 to 9 p.m. on 990WBOB.com with the Rotunda. My most recent episode, which is on the website now. There's actually a couple of things that I wanted to point out. Gallery Night in Providence is being hosted by Sprout Co-working. It's a virtual event. I think arts and humanities are important for everybody, especially in these times when, we're kind of all housebound for the most part. This is something where virtually you can see some artwork and, get to, I think you even get to judge it and vote on it, which is pretty cool. Definitely check them out. Also, in relation to, to the pandemic and just to general life, I did a segment on the 2.4 million Americans who deal annually with panic attacks and how you can spot them, how you can help treat them, more importantly, where you can get help. And most supremely important out of all of that was to let people that are suffering from that to know that you are not alone.
Yeah, important stuff right there. No doubt about it. RIpodcast.com. Search for Bartholomew Town on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Put out an interesting one today with Peter Lance. He was on the show last summer. He's an author and journalist, multi-Emmy Award winner with ABC World News, and recently had a piece in Vanity Fair about Doris Duke, the tobacco heiress, owner of Rough Point. Turns out she's a cold-blooded murderer, and Newport's elite class has covered this up. Even just today, the Doris Duke Foundation still making donations to different elements of Newport society. A fascinating book right there, and we discussed it on the podcast. I'm giving away a copy of the book, which there's a full-length book out today. It's a great story. RIpodcast.com. You can find it there. Also, TV Wednesday night, 7:00, Rhode Island PBS.
Awesome. And so thank you, gentlemen, for the great show. You can find me at Twitter at Luis Daniel Munoz. And the O would be a 0 on Twitter, or on Facebook at Luis Daniel Munoz. So LuisDanielMunoz, MD. And that'll bring you to my Facebook page, where you can find some commentary and additional information regarding some of the sorry, froze it for a second, some of the posts and topics that we've discussed today. I just want to end it on a different note, as always, which is that, I've been thinking a lot about this metaphor of a lighthouse, being, that Rhode Island lives by we live by the sea. And, when a light keeper, so often we think about a lighthouse as a beacon, something we want to go towards. And I think too often we get caught up on this idea that we need to find that beacon. So what is a beacon? And everyone's looking for it, especially in a time where you need hope. But it's interesting that the light keeper presents a different perspective, right? Because for the most part, they're sitting there in isolation in this darkness and at night, shining a light across this really dark, per se, horizon and looking, and not looking for the sake of finding the beacon, right? But looking to see if they can find someone who's lost. And I think if we approach this crisis, if we approach these difficult topics in that way, with a desire to shine a light on an area with the assumption that perhaps that might help someone, then I think the discourse that's taking place, or the debates, I would say, can and then in fact turn to discourse, and that discourse can transform some of the kind of trigger happy trollism that is taking place into actually solution oriented approach. And that's what we need in Rhode Island moving forward, right? We need, yes, hope, but we need to bring that hope or transform it into that light and shine it on areas and then find a path forward for all of us. So I don't know if that is inspirational, but certainly I hope that you could grasp the metaphor. And it's one that I've been struggling with. And I'm always trying to reset myself to make sure that the words that are coming out of my mouth have some constructive value for the solutions we need today. So thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great evening. See you all next week here on Pump Up the Volume. Thanks, guys.